Welcome. In this video, we're going to discuss the different perspectives in psychology. Now, the number kind of changes depending on who you talk to. Some things have been added in, some things have been taken away. We're going to focus on 5 perspectives in psychology that we'll cover in detail as we go through the semester. While the number of perspectives in psychology may vary depending on what source you're looking at, we're going to focus in on these 5. And these dominate the field of psychology. They reflect the way that psychologists ask questions about behavior, the assumptions they may have about how the mind works, and the different ways of explaining why people do the things that they do. They also differ in the way they might approach research and the types of questions they may ask. So we're going to focus on the biological, psychodynamic, behavioral, cognitive, and cross-cultural perspectives. There are some others that we'll kind of discuss as we go throughout the semester, like evolutionary psychology, social perspectives, social psychology perspective, and humanism. And we'll learn a little bit more about each one of these as we go through the semester and the theories and beliefs that are the basis for them. But I want to introduce them now, so that by the end of the semester, you really have a good, strong understanding of what they are. The first one we're going to discuss is the biological perspective. And a psychologist from this perspective is going to look at how biology affects our mental processes and our behaviors. So they're going to look to neurons, brain anatomy, hormones, brain activity, neurotransmitters to try and explain behavior. So does a certain disorder, say depression, is it caused by a lack of a certain neurotransmitter? Or when we sleep, what does our brain activity look like when we sleep? Coming from the psychodynamic perspective, think Freud. And many of you have probably heard of Freud at some point in your lives. Sigmund Freud, famous psychologist, often talked about in the history sections. We will discuss some of his theories briefly later on in the semester, and only briefly because a lot of them haven't found scientific evidence or empirical evidence to support them. But when you think the psychodynamic perspective, you think psychoanalysis and, the therapist sitting there jotting notes while someone lays on the couch and they're asking them questions about their childhood and their unconscious dynamics, things that they're trying to bring to the forefront, things that they're unaware of that they think are driving their behavior. And so they think if they can resolve those unconscious dynamics, that they can change some sort of abnormal behavior. Behavioral perspective, we will discuss when we get to learning later on in the semester. And they really look to the environment and experience and how that shapes our behavior. So we'll discuss Ivan Pavlov and how his dogs learned how to salivate in the response to a bell instead of simply just food. And so again, it's something in the environment and experiences that we have that shape our behavior. And so they look to see how those influences us and how we can use those to learn new things. Someone from the cognitive perspective is interested in the how and the why of the behavior. So how do we remember things? Why do we forget things? How do we learn language? Why does someone have a speech delay? How can we help that person with a speech delay? Why do we think the things that we think? Why do we believe certain things? So that's all coming from the cognitive perspective. So cross-cultural psychology is looking to see how culture influences our behavior and how our behaviors differ across cultures. And so I didn't add in the social psychology perspective in this video because I think the cross-cultural perspective is part of that social psychology perspective, but we will cover both a little bit in more detail throughout the semester. So this is again just a brief introduction to these different perspectives, and the idea is that in this introduction to psychology class, we will cover these in more detail, and so hopefully you have a really good understanding as we get to the end of the semester.